And now for the last look. As Americans seethe over high prices, it's worth remembering that inflation was at the heart of populism's rise in America. Not the populism of Donald Trump or Bernie Sanders, but the populism of the 1890s, the People's Party or Populist Party. At the time, they weren't complaining about inflation. It was something they desperately wanted. The U.S., you see, was going through a period of deflation. From 1870 to 1890, prices fell by a cumulative 30% or 2% a year. That may sound like a good thing in today's environment, but deflation can cause all kinds of problems. One group negatively impacted: people in debt. Think of a farmer getting fewer dollars for his crops every year, but still on the hook for fixed mortgage payments. This dynamic contributed to the forming of the Populist Party and to one of its central demands, that the United States abandon the gold standard and add silver to the money supply. The idea was to get more money into circulation and drive inflation up. That's good for debtors and bad for creditors. The populists ultimately found a tribune in Democratic presidential candidate William Jennings Bryan. Bryan railed against the gold standard as a tool of greedy capitalists.
You shall not crucify mankind upon a cross of gold.
Today, there's a new interest group calling for debt relief: Americans with student loans. President Biden says he's close to a decision on forgiving their loans. According to the Washington Post, the president seems inclined to cancel $10,000 worth of debt per borrower, excluding individuals who make more than $150,000 a year. Some Democrats like Chuck Schumer and Elizabeth Warren want him to cancel $50,000 for all borrowers, which Biden opposes. The most extreme proposal, championed of course by Bernie Sanders, is to eliminate all student debt in the country, which amounts to $1.7 trillion.
If we can give tax breaks to billionaires, you know what we can do? We can cancel all student debt in this country.
But in a reverse of the 19th century, today's rampant inflation is already giving debt relief to these borrowers. Outstanding student debt, after adjusting for inflation, is declining. Most student loans have fixed interest rates. Now, inflation, which means price increases, doesn't directly erase debt, but it does indirectly. When inflation drives up wages, as people are facing higher prices, they can demand higher wages, and indeed, as of March, workers' earnings were up 4.7% from last year, the fastest growth in almost 40 years. Of course, they are also reckoning with higher everyday costs, but most student loan debts remain the same. So this doesn't seem like the time for massive student debt forgiveness. The policy would also be quite regressive, benefiting higher income earners more than lower income Americans. People take out student loans, after all, because getting a degree will help them earn more. Granted, that doesn't always pan out. But if Washington is going to embark on more big spending, tax credits for all Americans at lower income levels would make much more sense. Also, forgiving loans would only encourage colleges to keep raising tuition costs, which have risen 2.5 times faster than inflation over the last 2 decades. Biden's anticipated student debt plan, which is the least generous one on the table, appears to be the most popular one among the public. Yet, populists on his left flank are calling it grossly inadequate and demanding more. Broad debt forgiveness polls badly. Do Democrats want to embrace the caricature of being the party of overeducated elites who want special favors? It's worth considering what happened to the Populist Party of the 19th century. Their man, William Jennings Bryan, lost to William McKinley in the election of 1896. In office, McKinley did the opposite of what the populists wanted. He strengthened the gold standard. He then defeated Bryan again in the election of 1900. Bryan lost again in 1908. A reminder that populism is not always popular. Thanks to all of you for being part of my program this week. I will see you next week.